Good afternoon or good morning everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, which is all about getting to grips with Capture One Fujifilm, or getting started I should say. So the purpose of this webinar really is to get you orientated with the interface, tell you what you can expect and edit some shots so you know really how to take those first steps and navigate your way around the software. And then later on we're coming back in June with kind of a more in-depth follow-up to this as well. So this is really just to kind of get you on your feet and started. Now, before we look at Capture One, just a few housekeeping things. So the maximum time that we have allocated today is 60 minutes. We're definitely not going to go over that. It might even be a little bit quicker as well. We are recording this as well, so don't worry if you miss something or need to follow up again or rewatch certain parts, because we will send you a recording. And you're very welcome and encouraged to submit your questions anytime. We'll talk about that in the second, the best way to do that. And you'll also get a survey a couple of hours after the webinar's over. It would be great if you can answer that, just so we know if we're hitting the right spots and everything. Now, if you want to ask a question, it's best if you put your specific questions in the Q&A tab. But it just keeps them separate from the main chat, as there are rather a lot of you today, and this way if you do have a direct question, then it means that we can see it and it doesn't get buried in the main chat window. Also, my colleague Andre is helping out in the background as well, so you might see a few questions answered via text from Andre as well. If we don't manage to answer your specific individual question, please don't be offended. As I said, there is rather a lot of you, so we're trying to pick out the most common ones. Now, if asking questions and chatting is not your thing, you can hide that window and that will just give you a bit more screen real estate as well. So let us begin. So let's bring up Capture One on screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic steps. We're going to make a catalog. That's what we can store our photos in. Get a few photos in there so you know the import process, orientate the interface so you know where to find things, and then finally do a few image edits and learn how to export as well. So that's the goal for today. Now, first of all, for those of you who are new to Capture One, then what can you expect really? So a couple of brief points. Compared to other photo editing apps, let's draw that comparison. Of course, Capture One is a RAW converter like many other apps, so it takes the RAW files from your Fujifilm camera and converts them, allows you to make adjustments, edits, fix things, add your creative input if you like, and then finally export to final formats. So like Lightroom and many other applications, that is the purpose of Capture One. So why should you bother with Capture One? What's the difference? Well, we believe image quality and the way we handle Fujifilm files is very important and excels above the rest. Film simulations we can have a look at as well, as you can directly have access to film simulations in Capture One, and also the precision of editing of what you can do, and also how well the sliders work as well and give you the kind of results that you would expect. Okay, so right now you can see Capture One on screen, obviously. So what we're going to do, I'm going to close this down and we're going to kind of go back to the beginning as if we were starting from scratch. Now I'm using Capture One Pro, but it has all the same tools as Capture One Pro for Fujifilm. For Capture One Express, the free version, that has a much more limited set of tools. So there's going to be many things you'll see today which won't apply to Express, but the image quality that you get out of Capture One Express, the free version, is exactly the same as Pro. Pro just gives you more editing tools, essentially. So I'm going to assume you know how to install Capture One. That's pretty simple. It'll take you through a little orientation process just so you can kind of arrange the interface how you like. And now we're at the point where we want to get some photos into Capture One. Now I'm going to begin by making a brand new catalog. So let's just call this Fujifilm. I always miss an I out at some point. Fujifilm webinar. Did I spell it right? Correct. And basically what we're creating here is a database that tracks where all your photos are, whether they're on external hard drives, internal hard drives, servers, whatever. This knows where they are. By default, it goes into your pictures folder. So let's pop it into our pictures folder and say choose. You can store this in any other location, but for best performance, if you can store it on your internal hard drive, that's going to give you the fastest catalog performance. Where we store our pictures, which you'll see in a minute, isn't really so critical. But the location of my catalog, it's going to be in my pictures folder. And as I said, click this button to choose any other location. Okay, so let's say OK. What we get is a brand new empty catalog like so. Now we're going to get some photos into this first, and then we'll talk about the different aspects of the interface, because it's hard to kind of talk about the interface when we don't have any pictures to look at. So I'm sure you can see there's this huge import images button in the center. That's a good clue where to start. The same import button also lives up here in the top left-hand corner of the interface. But I'm going to hit this and our import images dialog pops up like so. Now really, for you guys and girls learning currently, as I said, we're going to keep today nice and simple, so we're not going to dig into some of the more sophisticated aspects of what we can do on import. We're going to keep it nice and basic. So first of all, import from, we need to choose where we're going to get our pictures from. So I'm going to go in here and choose a folder. And I'm going to navigate to an external hard drive, and I'm just going to pick out a folder of Fuji images I know from a friend of mine, Fabienne, like so. So this is going to be my source for pictures. So we're going to say open, and Capture One will give me a view of the contents of that folder. Destination wise, so that really covers import too. Where do we want to get our pictures from? So it could be a current location, like on my little external hard drive, or it could be on a memory card coming from a camera. So those are the two likely scenarios. Now destination wise, we've got a few choices here. So I'm going to leave this set to current location. That just simply means they're going to stay on my external hard drive. Capture One will know how to access them. Now, if we were importing from memory card, do we want to leave them on the memory card? No, we do not. So in our destination pop down, we would choose a location where to put them. But right now we're going to leave it on current location. Now everything else is kind of bonus material that you can or don't need to access. But as I said, today we're keeping it simple. So we're just going to do import from, import to, and leave it at that. So let's say import all like so. Fabienne's pictures are popping in down on the right hand side, and then you can see a little activity window pops up that tells us we're generating previews. So Capture One's just making a preview of each shot, which is essentially a performance trick, so that when we browse through our images, they pop up nice and quickly, so Capture One doesn't have to read raw data all the time. So we've got some photos in. How do we access those photos? So if we go to our very first tool tab, this is really our kind of organizational HQ where we can see the contents of our catalog. So I'm going to go straight down to this section, and then you can see if we bring up the Finder, and it's the same for Windows, doesn't make any difference whether you're on Mac or Windows. If I go to my little external hard drive, Capture One demo catalog, demonstration images, and then we've got Fabienne like so. So we've got this path is currently my catalog. Now if we wanted to import something else, let's do that as well, just so we can look at a different location. Then we can say import. You get the idea. Let's grab something else. Let's choose a different folder. Let's choose a Fujifilm X photographer. Let's go for Brian and say open. Similar process, that's 30 shots. We're going to leave them in their current location and say import like so. So notice the import process is pretty quick. So it doesn't take very long to do, essentially. And now on the left-hand side, we can start to see the different locations that I can browse to in my catalog. So there's Brian's folder, there's Fabienne's folder, like so. Let's go back to Brian's for a second. Now there's a whole lot more other sort of catalog operations that we can do. If you want to get really deep into the asset management, then I suggest watching a webinar from a few weeks ago that deals just with asset management. We cover this area very, in simple terms in a second, but to go deeper in this, then I'd suggest watching that other one. So in the first tool tab, again, a summary of what's going to happen here or what's happening in here. This is your organizational HQ. So what we've already looked at, the folders area, that shows us the actual location of our photos or the ones that we've imported into our catalog. Catalog collections shows us some simple shortcuts, is the best way to describe it. So we can see all images in my catalog. So we've got 50 because that's 30 plus 20. And we can see the last 10 imports that we made, just for easy to see. Okay, there's the memory card or import I did at 9 minutes past 3, for example. Here's the the first one I did at 8 minutes past 3, and so on. User collections, that just allows you to make simple collections like albums and smart albums and so on, if you want to organize in that way. Let's have a quick look at questions, and then we will move on to looking at the interface. So let's see. Oh, Andre's been beavering away in the background, answering questions, which is good. Tom was asking, is there an import from Apple Photos? No, but you can import from Lightroom and Aperture. So if you look at Import Catalog, Lightroom and Aperture, and Media Pro, which is a legacy application from us, and also another Capture One catalog. But you can import from Lightroom and Aperture, works very nicely. Again, you can watch a whole tutorial just on that process, but it's super simple. Jose was asking, which Andre's answered to, is there a Capture One version 20 for Fujifilm cameras alone? And that's a good discussion, actually. So you have Capture One Pro, that covers all camera models, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fujifilm, Panasonic, Olympus, Leica, and so on. Capture One Pro Fujifilm only works on Fujifilm cameras. The benefit is that the cost is lower, but there's no sort of difference in functionality. So if you already own Capture One Pro, you don't need to buy Capture One Fujifilm. But if you only ever shoot Fujifilm cameras, then you can save yourself some cash and just buy the special Fujifilm version. Nice. Okay, but Pro, as I said, will read raw versions from multiple cameras, more than 600. Fujifilm obviously is just for supported Fujifilm cameras. Okay. Good question from Hashif. It says, when photos are imported from an external drive to the catalog, does it mean they're duplicated? No, they're referenced. So remember, when we say destination current location, Capture One is just looking at where they are. They don't get moved, they don't get copied, they're simply added to the catalog. So no duplications there. Okay, let's cancel out of that. I just need a quick sip of water and let us move on. All right, so you've probably guessed from the little simple things we've done so far a little bit about the interface. So obviously in the center is what we call the viewer. So that is where our photo is, which allows us to look at it at 100% or fit screen or a myriad of zoom levels in between. On the right hand side is what we refer to as the browser. This just shows us the contents of our currently selected collection in the first tool tab in the library tool. So if I switch to Brian, I'm going to see Brian's photos. If I switch to Fabienne, I'm going to see Fabienne's photos. Simple as that. On the left hand side we have our tool tabs, these guys at the top here, and they're arranged into sort of sensible categories like exposure tools, color tools, compositional tools like lens correction, cropping and rotation, and so on. And along the top is our toolbar, which has various action buttons which turn things on and off, like exposure warnings. So if I mess up the exposure, for example, you can see my shadow warnings and my highlight warnings. So various on-off buttons along the top. Now a slightly different thing in the center, these are the cursor tools. So these change the behavior of what the cursor does, and more on that as we go through the webinar as well. Now, if you don't like that layout, that's perfectly fine, because Capture One can be fully customized. Now, we won't go into all the customization potential today, because we could do a whole webinar on that, to be honest. But when you first install Capture One, it will take you through a simple setup process. But if you have a look in the View menu, this is where we do all our customization. So if, for example, you prefer the tools on the right hand side, we can go down to Customize Tools, and then right here we can pick Place Right. And now that's just going to switch the browser and the tools over. And for example, if you prefer your browser on the bottom, we can say Customize Browser, Place Below, and I can change that down here to a film strip mode, for example. So you can really, build the kind of interface you want. On the tool tab side of things, we have a scrolling area and a fixed area. And you can happily move any tool from the scrolling area up into the fixed area, like so. And you can move that back again. You can add or remove by right-clicking on any tool tab and adding any tool you wish, or removing any tool you wish. So if there's a bunch of tools that you think you're never going to use, you can just get rid of them. The order of these tools can be changed. So on the Mac, for example, if I hold down my Command key, I can move the tool tabs around. On PC, it would be the Alt key, Option key. So tons of different things you can do. You can also right-click on the toolbar and choose Customize, and pick any various buttons which you can drag onto that toolbar as well. So if something isn't working for you, or if there's a tool there which is just taking up valuable space, then just get rid of it and rearrange it as you wish. And the crucial thing to do is also under Workspace is save your workspace. So that will lock down that particular workspace. If you've made a complete mess of it, if you go back to default, then that will just reset to the factory default, which is what I'm going to use, because then it will be a little bit more familiar as well. Okay. In terms of using the various different tools, pretty sure you can figure that out, but there's a couple of handy little tips. So obviously, dragging a slider, you can just drag a slider to make changes. If you want to reset a slider, the fastest thing to do is double click anywhere on the slider bar, and that will take you back to 0. Very fast way, rather than trying to manually drag it back to 0. If you want to preview what the slider is doing, then you can click the name, like click and hold, and that will show you like a little before and after. For example, just a long press on the slider name itself. Now to reset everything back to 0, the rearward facing or left facing arrow, that's your reset for that particular tool. So if we click on that, that takes everything back to 0. Now each of the tools has these various little icons in the top. First one, the question mark, takes you to a help page. Second one, the magic wand, does an auto adjust. We can also do an auto adjust for the entire tool set here as well, if we wish. And a long press allows you to pick which element you would like in auto adjust. Copy apply we'll come back to in a second. That's a little up down arrow. And this guy here, the 3 stacked lines, or hamburger menu as it's known, allows you to recall different presets for that particular tool. And finally, the 3 dots allows you to change defaults for a particular camera. So for example, the default for an X-T2 on this tool is zeroed out. Kind of makes sense. If you would prefer to always have some kind of adjustment, you can save that as the defaults for that camera model. So help, auto, copy apply, reset, presets, submenu. Simple as that. And most of the tools have those similar kinds of things. Okay, a couple of basic other things that you would need to know, and then we'll kind of do a few image edits, and then we can set you on your way to success with Capture One. I mentioned briefly when we were talking about the interface, about the cursor tools at the top. So these essentially change the behavior of what the cursor is doing. Now the default one that I generally stick to is the hand tool. So this allows me with a double click to zoom into 100% and just pan around the shot just for check for focus. and those kinds of things. If I double click once more, then it goes back to fit screen. So that's known as the pan tool or hand tool, however you want to refer to it. The second one that you're probably going to use most commonly is obviously the crop tool, like so. So as soon as I pick that, this then allows me to crop the shot as I wish. I can either crop in the center or outside of the corners, do typical things like hold down shift to lock the aspect ratio and so on. Not massively different to other applications. Notice that some of them have a little drop down arrow, so if I do a long press, that allows me to pick additional options like in terms of the crop tool, the aspect ratio and so on. Also, when that cursor tool is selected, you can right click and bring up the same set of adjustments as well. So on the pan tool, if I right click, I actually get a little mini navigator. So if I zoom into 100% and right click, then I get a little mini navigator which I can use to pan around the shot as well. Now we won't cover every single cursor tool because there's a lot. Some of them also are duplicated within various other tools as well. But pan tool you're going to need, and crop tool you're going to need as well, and we'll pick up a few others as we go through some image edits as well. Now all of these have shortcuts as well. I'm not going to use shortcuts today extensively because it makes it very difficult for you to follow on screen what's going on. But for example, H picks up the hand tool, C picks up the crop tool. Simple as that. Every shortcut can be customized as well. And if you want a summary of the shortcuts, if you go to the edit menu and look at edit keyboard shortcuts, then you'll see a complete sort of list of various different shortcuts. If you want to find one, by far the fastest way is to use the search term. So if I type in crop, for example, I can see that composition, crop, I've got set to C, like so. And then for my pan tool, I think it's called pan, navigation pan is set to H. You can override that to whatever you like. So I'm just on the default keyboard shortcut set, but I've also got my own personalized set saved here as well. To see a summary of everything, hit summarize down the bottom, and that will open a web page with like a text list of all the various different shortcuts. Super. Okay, so by now you know how to get some images into Capture One, I would hope. You know the different elements of the interface, how to customize it, how to change the shortcut keys if you wish, and also a little bit about what these various cursor keys do as well. So I'll have a look at some questions, and then what we do next is do some edits and some basic things like copy paste as well. So let's have a look at questions. Anton was asking, is there a discount for Capture One 20 Fujifilm? It's discounted anyway, so it's already much cheaper than Capture One Pro, so much more affordable. So in that sense, it's already discounted. What's the difference between Capture One and Lightroom? That's a big question, one which we could spend a long time talking about. Now, this is of course my personal opinion, and you should make up your own minds as well. Both Capture One and Lightroom do a similar thing. So they take your raw file from a Fujifilm camera, allow you to edit, adjust, create, and export to your final format. So essentially, they do the same thing, but no two raw converters are the same. So the way we interpret the raw file is different. If you lined up 10 different raw converters and gave them the same photo, you would get 10 different default results. So we happen to think our default result is good in terms of sharpness, noise reduction, color rendition, and of course the ability to use the adjustment tools to get the look that you want as well. Performance wise, I'd also say we have the edge in terms of browsing, zooming in, editing, exporting, and so on. But don't take my word for it. Download the trial and give it a go as well. Let's see. Jose was asking, is there a Capture One feature similar to that one of Lightroom that allows us to view different suggestions for editing an image when clicking on the keys R and O? I'm not aware of that Lightroom feature actually, but I can tell you that we don't have something like that. But it's an interesting idea. I think, Jose, you should have, if you like, without really too much worries on your part to be able to make those decisions yourself. Because I think any of you can look at a photo and think, how can I improve this without having the machine take over, if you like. So let's actually do that and do some edits as well. So thank you for some questions, some really good ones. And remember, questions I'm more likely to see if you put them in the Q&A tab as well. So I might miss them if they're in the chat window. All right, I'm going to import just another shot. And I've used this before actually on a few Fujifilm webinars before, because it's a good, let's just see if this is the right folder, because it's kind of an underexposed shot. So let's grab this one and this one, because they're quite underexposed and it gives us a good overview of the potential of what Capture One can do, starring Nora the dog here. So this was shot with a GFX 50, so it has a good dynamic range, but that doesn't mean the kind of edits we're about to do are not possible with, you know, an X-T2 or an X-T1 or much older cameras as well. So we've got our shot into Capture One and we want to start editing. So what we're going to do, first thing I'm going to do is hide my browser, shortcut Command or Control B. That just gives me a bit more space. And before anything, I'm going to grab the straighten tool. I'm just going to draw along the horizon here because it's a bit wonky. So that's the straighten cursor tool. That's better. Now I'm going to pick my crop tool and let's just squeeze this crop down a little bit as well. Now, obviously, this is underexposed because we can't see kind of what's going on here. Nora the dog is looking very dark. It's underexposed. Color's probably about right, might be a bit too cold, but we need to do some work on the exposure. So our simple exposure tools are sitting in the exposure tool tab. So obviously this is a bit dark, so let's just raise this up. I don't want to push this too much because then I'm going to lose kind of the atmosphere and the detail on the lake. So I'm just going to give that a little nudge, because what we want to do is try and lift the shadows, if you like. Now, two ways of doing that is that we've got the shadows and the blacks. Now the difference between shadow and black is that shadows will lift, if you like, let's say the lake here, the tree line, definitely the darkest areas down here, whereas blacks will only deal with the very deepest shadows. So a combination of these two is very powerful to give us good control. So I'm going to lift the shadows a little bit and then we're going to open up the blacks a touch more. Now the negative effect of what we've done so far is that it's lacking a little bit of contrast and also warmth. So I'm going to warm it up slightly as well. And then we're going to pull our highlights down because that's going to get our warmer tones back in, but not too much, because if we go to here, it's starting to look fake. That's not very realistic. So just going to bring that a little bit down and the whites a tiny bit as well. Now, as I said, it's getting a bit flat. So we can throw in a bit of contrast, looks better, and also some clarity, which is also a contrast adjustment, but it only affects the midtones. So it's going to have less effect on my blacks and less effect on my whites. So if we bring up the clarity, that's going to give us a nice little mid-tone pop, like so. Now, last thing that I want to do, over here there's a distracting plane. So I'm going to grab my heel brush, this one over here, right click, and we're not going to go extensively into heel and cloning, but just to show you how easy it is, and we're just going to get rid of that guy like so. So a simple edit. Now, how do we preview what we've done so far? So if I click on my before and after button, what we get by default is a slider, which I can then drag across the photo to see what's going on. If we zoom into 100%, this will give you a good idea of what we managed to do, just with really a few simple sliders. We didn't do anything fancy with curves or local adjustments or anything like that. It was just pulling a few sliders to really maximize the detail that's in the cameras. Now this before and after button, that's also on a shortcut, which is Y. So if you tap Y on your keyboard, that just brings up your before and after. If you don't like the slider, it's not for everybody, then we can change this to a full view. So just a click and hold. So now if I tap Y on and off, like so, then we can see before and after. Now that was a pretty speedy edit. It didn't take us very long, and it significantly improved what we can do with the photo. Now all of you watching are totally capable of doing that. It's really just learning about what the different sliders do, and with practice you'll see how they react to the photo. So all we really have here is a combination of exposure, a little bit of contrast to correct the flatness, and then just controlling our various highlights and shadows with these sliders, and kind of negating the flatness once we've done that by adding just a little bit of clarity. Not much, just gave us a bit more pop as well. Now, if we had a sequence of shots like this, and we do actually have another one which is relatively similar, what we could do is copy and paste those adjustments across. Now that's very simple. So if I hit the copy button up in the top right hand corner of your screen, choose one or more other shots and hit apply, then Capture One will just put those adjustments across. What it will miss out by default is any compositional changes. So it won't have added my cropping, rotation or anything like that. In fact, I might have asked it to do that. Let's see. But by default, I'll show you what happens. As soon as we hit copy, it loads any adjustments into the adjustments clipboard, which is on this tool tab, like so. Now by default, what it will do is actually miss composition, but I've turned that on. So you'll see here under the three dots here, auto select, I've got it set to copy everything. Now as it comes out of the box in Capture One, it will do everything except composition. So if we go back to this one and just hit the master reset button, top left, that will take everything back to 0. So now if I say copy, pick this one and say apply, it'll do everything except my compositional changes. So now I could grab my straighten tool, straighten the horizon, should be flat, grab my crop, and then just tweak that to something that I like, for example. There we go. Now again, see before and after, we can hit Y on my keyboard, so that's how it came out of camera, and then after a few simple edits like so. Let's see, just looking at a few more questions and then we'll continue some other edits. So Sam was asking, David, can you use the edit out of the aeroplane? So that was our healing tool, as it was called, looks like a little sticking plaster. So that just allows you to get rid of spots and artifacts and so on. You can use it on bigger objects as well. This is a pretty clean shot, but if we wanted to get rid of some water spots or whatever, then we could do so. On this shot, is the plane still here? Was it caught as well? Well, there's something going on here, so we could get rid of that, like so. So, no, it's not in the Express version, to answer your question, Sam. It's only in the Pro Fujifilm or Pro version, but it's actually a super valuable tool because it means you can do like a perfect edit in Capture One without necessarily having to go out into Photoshop or Affinity Photo or something like that. But hopefully that answers your question, Sam. Is the before and after button available on Express? Yes, it is as well, but it's only a before and after. It doesn't have the slider, I believe. So don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but the basic before and after functionality is there as well. That was a feature we added last Monday. So if you already have Capture One and you're wondering where on earth is this lovely before and after button, you just need to go into your account on captureone.com and download as well. Murthy was asking the difference between subscribing or buying outright. You can do both with Capture One. There's no cloud storage or anything like that. It's simply, do you want to pay monthly to use Capture One, or do you want to own the license outright? So two choices with Capture One. Financially, there's really not much in it. It's just really on your personal preference. Okay. Let's check the rest of those questions. Andre's doing a fabulous job in the background, answering way faster than I can, so that's great. Jonas was saying, if you change the default on a tool, So for example, if we change the defaults here, does that affect existing photos? No, it's only for new imports. So if I said save as defaults, we actually get a prompt. So I can apply it to the existing ones or don't apply, like so. So I'm just going to set my defaults back again, otherwise that's going to mess. So now if I hit reset, see, it's just resetting back to what I had it set, like so. But it doesn't affect any existing ones. Let's see. Sam was saying, I just downloaded today, before and after button doesn't work, but hitting Y does, or using the view menu. Okay, that's interesting. What you could do, Sam, is just right click, go to customize toolbar, just drag the default set back up. That might fix it, like so. Or if you're using a Wacom, sometimes it can be finicky as well, but it's working good for me. Okay, so let's do some other edits. Let's go back to Fabienne's selection and let's find something streety. Just again, so you can get the idea of a few different combinations of what the sliders do and how to apply it to your own photos as well. And let's have a look at Fuji film simulations as well. So let's go for, let's choose this one, for example. Okay, so quick drink. Okay, so we're in our color tool tab and you'll find a tool called base characteristics. And this describes really essentially the base characteristics of the shot. So it's the profile of the camera. You don't ever need to touch that. And it also has an entry called curve, which is, if you like, a default look that we apply to the photo, which every RAW converter does. So every RAW converter puts in some kind of default contrast, sharpness, noise reduction, and so on. Now with compatible Fujifilm cameras, it will also mimic the film simulation that you had on at time of capture. So if this is set to auto, whatever you have set in camera will be what you see in Capture One. But the good news is you can retrospectively change that. So if I wanted to think, oh, actually this might look nice in Acros, then I can just change it like so. Or if I feel like having a Turner Cinema, Classic Chrome, or whatever, then we can do so. So let's edit this one with a bit of Classic Chrome, like so. And you will find that matches what you see in the camera very, very nicely. So first thing I want to do is grab my crop tool. I'm just going to crop out some of the foreground, like so. And say that's good. Now when you have the crop tool selected, just a little segue, whenever you select the crop, you'll always see how the photo is cropped. And then to get out of the crop tool, you can hit enter, or you can just choose another cursor tool, like so. Now for this shot, I would like to, let's check perspective. If we use this cursor tool, I get a couple of lines that I can just align on my verticals to correct for any perspective fall off. So then I'm going to put it on the edge of this poster as well, just following those lines, and say apply, and then Capture One will just straighten up my verticals, which is really handy for architecture and actually all kinds of uses, but works nicely on this occasion. So what are we going to do to this shot? It looks pretty good out of camera. Kind of really can't argue with Fabienne's technique. It's a little bit flat for my liking. So what I'm going to do is go down to the contrast slider, and we're just going to bring that up. And also I'm going to add a bit of clarity. Remember, clarity is our mid-range contrast slider, like so, and just bring up the saturation a tiny touch as well. I know I use the Classic Chrome, which is kind of a bit muted, but I just want to bump it up a tiny bit. And then we can see if we can see into the cafe a little bit as well. So remember, on the first shot in the boat, we had a combination of shadows and blacks. Now I'm guessing if I lift up shadows, it's probably going to brighten everything too much, and now it doesn't look very realistic. So what I think will work better is if I open up blacks then it will just brighten up these super dark areas a little bit. So if I just open up the blacks a bit, there we go. That's what I wanted, just so we can see into the cafe a bit without making the rest of the shot flat. And hopefully highlights, if I bring those down a touch, that will work quite nicely. Now to get a basic vignette, we have a vignetting tool down here at the bottom, and this just gives us a simple vignette which we can do like so. Now zooming into 100%, sharpness looks spot on, noise reduction looks pretty good. And actually for any supported camera, we always add some default sharpening, which is just a tiny bit. We never over sharpen, and default noise reduction, with the idea being that when the photo opens in Capture One, it has a good balance of sharpness versus softness, so good photographically sharp. And noise reduction wise, we're removing the noise, but we're not removing detail. So those two things are kind of curated for each supported camera. So you might find different values if we go to the sharpening tool. So you can see for an X-T2 we apply these values by default. If we go back to a different shot, so this is a GFX, if you remember. So by default we give that 140.11. If we go back to the shot we were just looking at, it was 140.81, so a tiny bit difference. But each, camera is treated very critically by us in the factory to give you the best out of the box results. So we don't do a blanket sharpening adjustment, because for one camera that works, for another camera it doesn't work. So that's why everything is carefully curated in Capture One. To see before and after, let's click on our before and after logo. That was before, that was after. Or to see our slider, you can long press, or we can do Shift Y. That will switch between those two different adjustments. So if we zoom into 100%, we can see what the effect of the black slider did. So it just opened up those shadows a little bit, but it doesn't kind of destroy the contrast of the shot, as it were. And again, we didn't need to do anything fancy with local adjustments or anything like that. Let's do one more edit. Let's pick a landscape, and then we look at export, and then we should be good to go, I would think. So let's find a nice landscape. Let's pick this one because it's also a little bit flat, a little bit hazy as well. So again, exposure wise, we're probably okay. I'm just going to change a crop. So I just want to meet my crop at the bottom of that road, make it a bit more panoramic. If you want to crop to specific aspect ratios, remember you can right click and just pick your aspect ratio here as well. So I'm on unconstrained. So happy with that crop. So pick my hand tool once more, or you can hit enter. And looking at the adjustments, I'm going to brighten it slightly. I'm going to open up the levels tool, which you needn't be intimidated by. This just shows me my histogram. If I hit auto levels, that's the magic wand, Capture One will just set the highlight, shadow and mid-tone points appropriately. As you can see, if I reset the levels and just show you before and after, it's done a great job of improving the contrast, just doing a really super nice effort. So I'm not going to touch anything except for do auto on that. Now contrast wise, let's bump up our contrast a bit too. I don't want to make sure the blacks aren't going to get crushed too much. So I'm just going to open up my blacks a tiny bit, bring down the highlights ever so slightly, chuck in some clarity just to boost the contrast. And if I zoom into 100%, see it looks nice and sharp. Good job on the X-T2 there. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of structure, and what structure does is just improve some edge details, but we have to use it with care. So it's great for landscape elements, animal fur, architectural details, those kinds of things. And if I click on structure, that's before and after, just to add a little bit of kind of bite to these various different sections, like so. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. What I might do, see it's a little bit kind of hazy up in the top here. I'm going to go to layers, and we're going to cover layers more in the next section. But just to give you a little taste, I'm going to grab my gradient tool, draw a gradient mask down here, just change its shape slightly. So if I press M on my keyboard, you can see the mask in red. And it now means anything on this layer is only going to be actioned on the red part, so on my masked areas. So I'm going to add a bit more clarity into that section as well, just so we can see those hills a bit better and take the highlights and whites down, and maybe the brightness a tiny bit, not too much as well. Oh, we've got a dust spot up the top there, I think I've just seen. So let's grab my heel brush, need to make this a bit bigger, and then let's just draw over this section. I might need to fix that a little bit. Let's just choose that bit of the sky, and I need to erase just where I went over on the mountain. So let's just take that bit of the mountain out. There we go. So now that's just got rid of that nasty water spot as well. So I'm happy with that. So again, we didn't do anything particularly fancy. We did some basic edits, quick gradient mask, which is just fixing up the kind of mistiness in that section, and then our heel layer just to get rid of that water spot. Let's tap Y on the keyboard so we can see before and after, and then you can see what we did to that shot, like so. Easy peasy. Okay, let's have a look at some questions. Then I want to show you a little color edit actually, because I forgot that, and then we have a little look at that. What's the fastest way to change the camera curve on a series of images? It does change with copy and apply, or you're saying it doesn't, but it does change. So if we wanted to do, let's just take these 4 shots, let's turn off before and after, and I want to change this one to, let's do across so we can see it change. So that's black and white. So the little copy and apply button in base characteristics, if I hit that, you can see film curve is ticked. So now if I say apply, see that goes across to everything else. So we could do that on 100 shots if you wanted to as well. Let's go back to this shot once more. Is there a way to adjust horizontal? Yes, either by using the straighten tool. I don't really have a horizon to draw across. That's this cursor tool here. So what I can do is go to my compositional tool tab, excuse me, go to rotation, and I can either drag the slider, or I can use my cursor keys up and down, like so, just to jiggle it a bit till I think it's, have to do the peer at the screen look, something like that, like so. Let's see, color. Let's have a little look on color. Okay. So for color edits, let's find something a bit more colorful. What should we go for? This has got a few different color tones in there, so let's use that. So let's hide our browser, Command B, like so. Let's just do a quick edit. So I'm going to bring our exposure up a bit, open up our shadows, add some contrast and a bit of clarity, and I'll zoom in a bit so we're not looking at so much black, so we're looking at the building in the sky. So if we go to our color tool tab, you've got a few choices with the color editor. Super simple, very powerful basic one, or we can use the advanced color editor. But the easiest way to use the basic part is grab the color picker here. Let's say we want to boost the sky a little bit. I can do a couple of things. I can just click on the color tone, and Capture One tells me, okay, you need to adjust this. So if I bring the lightness down and the saturation up, that's going to just change that area. Then I could do another click. So if I click on the building, Capture One says change this one. So let's make that a bit darker and a bit more saturated, and so on. You get the idea. So you can click and then go and edit, or let's reset that. If I click on the shot and then start to drag, so if I drag downwards with my mouse, it's dropping the saturation. If I drag upwards with my mouse, it's boosting the saturation. So this is a click and drag with your mouse or pen or whatever you're using. So like so. Now if I go left and right, then I can change the hue, for example, as you can see. So a couple of different ways that you can edit. Now if you want to change what each orientation does, actually let's right click so you can see it. So hue we can have on any of those options. So I like to do Alt plus horizontal so I don't accidentally move the hue. Saturation we can have vertical, and then lightness, let's put that on horizontal. So now if I click on the blue sky and drag my mouse to the left, it's going to get darker. Now I can click on the building and drag left and so on. So you can work really nicely. Now the benefit of the advanced tab, and that's something we're covering in the next session, is that it gives me a lot more control over what color ranges I'm going to edit. So if I click on the blue, I can choose to include high saturated versions of that blue, just the low saturated versions. I can have a broad color range, I can have a very skinny color range, and so on. But that's for the next session. So get kind of comfortable with the basic tab first of all, and then we can move on to advanced in the next session. Yes, Chris, there is a luminosity mask on the grad, so you're way ahead of us in terms of what we were going to look at, but just to show you very easily. So any layer can have a luma range applied. So if I hit luma range, then we can decide on our luminosity range. Very powerful feature, bit out of scope for today's one, but that's good incentive for me to talk about that in the next session. Okay, we've got 8 minutes left. So how do we export? Two different ways we can export into from Capture One. So there's the quick and dirty method, or there's the super slick process recipe method. So quick and dirty is as you would expect. Hit the export button over here. So that's this one up in the top left next to export. So tap that. Simply need to specify where we want to export. So let's choose a folder. Let's make a new folder and we call this Fujifilm. So set as export. We're not going to make a subfolder today. And now we can just choose between my different formats. So let's say I want to have TIFF files and I want them to be in Adobe RGB and I want them to be full size. So we then just set up our image parameters. Once we're happy with that, say export. Let's actually do more than one. Let's do 4 shots. Export. Fujifilm folder, TIFF, uncompressed. Export. Capture One will churn away in the background. It is a background task, so you can always continue your editing. Export completed. So if we go to our pictures folder, there's Fujifilm and there's our different shots, as you can see. So that's just a quick and dirty method to do an export. Now the smart way to do it, which involves a bit more setup but then gives you consistency as you go through, is to create process recipes, and I'll cover this in a bit more detail in the next session as well. So what this essentially allows you to do is to have a bunch of different export presets which you can just tick on and then say process, and Capture One will just use each of those presets and process your shots. They can be to different locations, they can be renamed, they can basically do all kinds of stuff. It's a super powerful feature. So if you want to create your own, it's just a simple case of saying plus. Let's say we want to have a JPEG which is sized at 2000 pixels on the long edge. Then I would change my parameters down here. So I said I wanted a JPEG. I'm going to drop the quality a bit. I want sRGB. The scale I want to have on the long edge was 2000 pixels, as I said, and I'm going to specify my output location here. So let's specify my Fujifilm folder again. Let's pick some different shots. Let's just grab these 4. And now I will say process, and then Capture One will just use this process recipe and start processing out my shots, as you can see. So now if we go to my folder, we can see the JPEGs which have been exported 2000 pixels, like so, on the long edge. Now I could have 3 or 4 recipes running at the same time, so that's much more powerful, much more efficient, much more consistent, and it means you kind of don't have to stand over the computer doing various different process actions. You can do it all in one hit. Brilliant feature, very, very useful and time saving. And again, we'll look at that more in the later versions. So let's have a look at a few more questions. Just check, have you been behaving in the chat and being nice to each other? Yes, Jonas, there is a watermark option in the process recipe, so we can add text or image. So you could build a process recipe specifically that sticks a watermark on your shot. So very good question. There's many other options in here, like individual or unique file destinations, applying export sharpening, adding or removing metadata, and of course applying watermarks as you asked. Yes, Michael, it will be available after the webinar ends. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you'll get an email sometime tomorrow, I would think. That gives you information on how to access it, or just a link to the YouTube link. The link to the YouTube link. Karen was asking, is Capture One good at sizing up if it's needed? Yes. So you can size up and size down, of course. We did that with our long edge, but there's nothing to stop you also scaling up. I think the maximum is 400, 200, I think. 250, there we go. So if you can scale up, or if you don't need to go up by more than 250, Capture One does a great job. We've got the raw data to work with, so we should do a better job than a pixel editor like Photoshop, for example. Could we enable film simulation on different layers? Alan was asking. Would be a quick way to see their effect by turning the layer on and off. Yeah, it could be interesting. I don't know if that's technically possible, but then you would like to lower the opacity on each layer to remove the effect. Nice idea. Yeah. Whether it's technically possible or not, I don't know. Please recommend export resolutions for social media. It's always changing, I think, is the answer to that. What I would do is, if you Google it, there's some good pages that show you every kind of single export dimension. And the nice thing is about Capture One is that you can build your process recipes for that. So I have like an Instagram recipe, for example. And that would be, JPEG, and then I would set my longest edge to 1080 pixels, for example. And I also send that straight to a unique location to Dropbox, so then I can then upload it from my phone nice and easily. So I have a few of those recipes for different social media postings as well, and that just means, again, you're nice and consistent as well. Let's see, I think we are almost there. Pancat says many retouchers recommend Capture One more than Lightroom. Definitely in the professional space, Capture One's always seen as, we hold the mantle of image quality, noise reduction, sharpening, and precision of color tools. Like today we looked at the basic stuff, but as I'm sure, or I hope you can agree, you can do quite powerful and good adjustments just with a few basic sliders without it looking nasty and over processed and haloing all over the place and so on. So that's also the power of Capture One, is the greatness of those simple sliders. But as I said, what we can look at in the next session is the more advanced things like the advanced color editor, specific skin tone edits, working more with layers and so on. But you don't need to do all of that to get great photos. It's just more skills you can add to your tool set, if you like, to get the best out of every single shot that you've taken. But if you only spend your time in this tool tab using exposure, white balance, high dynamic range, and clarity, you'll get phenomenal edits out of it. So don't feel you have to use every single nook and cranny. Harry Hanram was asking, are there any third-party plugins for editing the image? I don't think you need them for editing because all the tools are here in Capture One. There's film grain, there's black and white conversion, there's advanced color editors, there's a color balance tool for color grading. We've got layers, kind of got everything really. There are plugins for like focus stacking, HDR merging, JPEG compression from JPEG Mini, uploading to format, and a few other plugins as well. But in terms of image editing, you don't really need them, I would say. Okay, we've got 60 seconds, being true to our time limit. Let's check on the last questions, and let's see. Thanks again to Andre for filling in so many of those other questions. So I think we are good, actually. If you want to continue your learning, what I can recommend is if you go to learn.captureone.com. So I'm just going to drag a web page onto the screen like so. So learn.captureone.com. You can turn on just tutorials up here in the top left, or you can just look at webinars as well. But if we said tutorials and then you wanted to know about color editing and we turn that on, oh, it doesn't like my web browser. Let's just restart that. Tutorials, there we go, and say color editing. Then Capture One will just sort all the various tutorials that work best for color editing, for example. So this is a great place to boost up your learning in Capture One as well, or learning about specific tools like the color editor. There's also lots of blog posts which you can see too. I'm going to refresh that. Blog posts, there we go, which are written by either internally or external people as well. So here's a good one recently from Pratik, good buddy of mine, talking about the healing brush for retouching on portraits. So check that out, learn.captureone.com. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today. I hope that was a good little introduction in what's possible with your Fujifilm cameras. The good news is you've got a great shot out of the gate anyway by picking a decent camera. You can only enhance it more in Capture One, essentially. Don't worry if you fluff the shot with a bad exposure as well. As you saw, kind of easy to recover and still get something that looks decent. Go and download a trial, give it a try, and see what you think. Don't take my word for it. Take 10 of your favorite shots, put them through the ringer in Capture One, and see what you think. So, hope to see you again later on in June. I'll make sure, actually, let's put the link in, the sign up link for the next one, so you have it. I'm going to add it as a sticky at the top, so it's easy for you to sign up. So at some point the sticky will appear at the top of the screen, and then you can sign up for the next one. Thanks everybody, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and see you all again in June, I hope, and enjoy playing with your Fujifilm cameras. So take care and have a good one. Bye now.